As you can see, I'm surrounded by a sea of baritone saxophones. We often find here at Sax that the poor old baritone saxophone is often left out of the conversation. It's all about the altos and the tenors, but today I'm going to put it right and put the baritone sax firmly back on the agenda. So I'm going to be testing 5 professional top-notch baritone saxophones, do the usual thing, put them through their paces. Let's check them out. So on the agenda today, I've got 5 baritone saxes for you, starting with a LeBlanc 711 Premier model. To the right of that, we have got a Yamaha Custom 82 model. And then over here, we have a P. Moriat PMB 300 DK finish. And over here, this is the Eastman 52nd Street baritone. And over on my right, this is the top Yanagisawa, the bronze model, the BW020. Now, you may think there's a little bit of an omission here. What about Selma Paris, eh? Well, we'd love to have a Selma Paris sax for you, but sadly, the lead times on these things is so great. We're talking 2 years, and actually now 3 years even is the wait time. So we have Series 2 and we have Series 3 on order, but sadly, nothing to show you today. But fear not, because we have a fantastic selection of pro baritone saxophones for you here today. So let's do the usual thing, put these through their paces and see what we think. So before I get into the sound, the kind of heart of the matter, if you like, let's talk about the ergonomics and the comfort of each instrument, because it's such an important thing with baritone. You know, we're dealing with the physicality of a very big instrument here. So starting with the LeBlanc, which is the first one that I tested for you, I find the ergonomics, generally speaking, very comfortable. It feels very solid. The only thing I would say is just spacing-wise, I find it's a little bit more spread out, particularly on the left hand, than I'd ideally like. So just this spacing here is just a bit more stretched on the left hand. I do like this flush A key here. That feels pretty nice and solid. Now on the right hand as well, just again, just sort of in relation to the left hand, just slightly more space than I'd ideally like. And also just the action just a tad on the heavier side, but nothing that can't be lightened off by a technician. So that's the LeBlanc, but overall pretty mechanically sound and comfortable, just a little bit more stretch than would be my absolute ideal. Now moving on to the next one, we have the Yamaha here. And I always find it interesting with Yamahas in the sense that they have this key action and key design that they put onto their top instruments, and they have this sort of top-down approach. So if you take, for example, the Yamaha custom instruments, they do all their design work on these instruments, and then they apply those design qualifications to the lower instruments in the lower series, you know, the 280s, the 480s, and 62s, etc. And this 82 design feels very similar to me to the design that you get on an alto or a tenor. It just feels like I've actually got an alto in my hand. So mechanically, it just feels really comfortable and very natural. So there's a sort of smaller, if we sort of compare a little bit to the LeBlanc, which I've just described there, It feels like there's just a more relaxed, sort of smaller cluster going on in my left hand. You just take your natural hand position, plonk it there, and it's all set out very nicely. So very comfortable. And it's a similar story with the right hand, so it feels great. Slightly more unusual low A key here. You've got this sort of curved bar, which doesn't bother me either way. I just find it interesting, and it performs and operates very well. So mechanically, just very solid and smooth on the 82. On to the next one, we have a P Moriat, and generally speaking, again, like the Yamaha, I actually find it very solid and very comfortable. It's a little bit more spaced out, I would say, than the Yamaha, but only slightly so. To me, it still feels very comfortable, very natural. The palm keys are nice and slender. They're not sort of protruding or anything, so there's no upset going on here. The table keys, again, as I say, it's not too spread, so easy to access those left-hand table keys, and pretty good on the right as well. And I also like the key action. It's got that nice sort of smooth feeling and a nice satisfying thud as you make contact with the tone holes. So overall, feels pretty smooth and solid on the P Moriat. So the next one, we have the Eastman, and it's a similar story here. I do like the ergonomics here, and it's actually sort of back to what we've got on the Yamaha a bit here, where it's nice and compressed and compact, feels very nimble, and I like that. It means you just get around nice and easily. So yeah, really love the feel there. Again, talking of low A keys, we've got a nice flush low A key here, which I remember pointing out on the individual video I did on this. Really like that. Otherwise, just feels great. And it's also a relatively lightish horn as well in terms of the build. Eastman put a lot into their recent wave of models, the latest 52nd Street models, whereby they sourced a different brass, which has, and I'll go into the sound section in a moment, but the brass is denser, and it's a little thinner, so it's lighter. So the overall build is lighter, and they've also sort of taken some care over the ergonomics to sort of trim it down so there's less mass there. So we're dealing with a slightly lighter horn, which I'm sure you'll agree is very important when it comes to baritone sax, because if we can reduce the weight, it just makes the whole exercise of playing it just a lot more comfortable. So that is the Eastman, and then on my far right, finally, we have the ever popular Yanagisawa baritones, and this one leads the charge really, being bronze and being the top one, the 20 model. Love the sound of bronze on Yanagisawa. Of course, we'll get into sound in a little bit, but let's just focus on the ergonomics of this, because again, talking about mechanically sound instruments, as I mentioned with the Yamaha, which is particularly mechanically good, I believe also this Japanese saxophone, the Yanagisawa, is also mechanically perfect, really. It just feels just like everything's placed beautifully. It's very nimble under the fingers. I also like the nice positive key action. There's a bit of a pop there. If anything, slightly on the heavier side for me. I own a Yanagisawa Alto, and I had that lightened off years ago just to give it that really light, nimble feel. And again, you could do the same on this instrument, but just naturally, the way it comes from the factory, it has this very positive, even feel over each finger, each key as we run up and down the instrument. The low A key on this one is a little bit different from some of the others that have this kind of flush look. It's got a little bit of a bump here, clearly part of the design of it so that you can perhaps access it in a different way. But otherwise, mechanically, just feels really sound. It's just easy to run up and down. The instrument feels great. So let's talk about the tone now. And back to the first one I tried there, which again is the LeBlanc. And this is quite a new kid on the block, really, the LeBlanc Premier series for us. And we've been generally impressed with the altos and tenors, producing a great sound, and they've responded well amongst our customers. And the Baritones, no exception, really. At this price point, it does a great job. Tone-wise, it's got a lovely, big, warm, full-bodied sound. If anything, I would say it's a little bit more on the resistant side. So you just have to work for the sound a little bit more. Perhaps some of you bari players out there enjoy that feeling of kind of chasing the sound and having to really put the air through the instrument to get that reward. And the reward is a big, full-bodied sound. So, yeah, very good. And overall, it's got a nice depth to it and a darkness to it. It's not a bright kind of nasty sound. It's well turned out sound. So that's the LeBlanc. Moving on to the Yamaha, the tone sort of takes a different direction with this. If you're going to compare with the LeBlanc immediately there, I find that the Yamaha sound is just very immediate and very responsive. It almost performs like an alto when you're just whispering about on it. And you're trying to play in the low reaches and produce that nice responsive melty sound. That's the word. It's very melty to me. It feels like you blow down it and the sound just kind of melts away. And so very responsive throughout the entire range of the instrument. And as you push the air through it more, it becomes very vibrant, and there's a brighter timbre to the sound, which I often find in Yamahas. When you push the air through, you get that very sort of striking, brighter sound, but it's a quality brightness. So overall, there's a nice sort of scope of tonality there from the sort of the melty, darker hues when we're just pushing less air through it, and it's very responsive, through to that brighter, more punchy sound. And then on to the P. Moriat. P. Moriats have the slogan, "Go for the sound." And I think this one here, the 300, is no exception. Immediately you hear that character of sound that P. Moriat are renowned for, that big, husky, characterful sound, and sort of with a silky essence in there as well. It's very sort of meaty, that would be another way of putting it. And you feel that through all the dynamic ranges, quiets through to the louds. It's also very responsive, just like the Yamaha. So, it's not a sound you particularly have to work for. It's just naturally there, this big, buoyant, powerful sound. So, yeah, I have no criticisms, really. And also, tuning-wise, I've not particularly mentioned the tuning with any of these two. Well, I haven't at all, because actually I find it very good overall on both of these models here to my left. And this one here, same thing again. You've got to get the mouthpiece position right, or your tuning's all over the place. That's one thing to note with the baritone sax. But tone-wise, just very satisfying and nice and full-bodied. And then over to my right here, we've actually got a similar characteristic here with the Eastman in comparison to the P. Moriat. Full of character, really, and personality. It's a very big, bold, and satisfying sound. I did an individual review on this recently, and I was bowled over by the sound quality. And again, I just touched on it before, but the brass that they're sourcing, I think that they're deriving really great results with their new tenor model, and the baritone is no exception as well. It sounds absolutely great. It's just a very defined core sound. And when you really push the air through this one, it really takes it. It's got a thunderous, big, booming sound, which I absolutely love. If anything, in terms of the absolute projection, I think it pushes out a little bit more than all three of these to my left here, just in terms of the pure projection. So love that. And then onto my right here, finally, we have the Yanagisawa Bronze 20 model. And Yanagisawas in general, known for their silky smooth sound, very responsive tone. This baritone's no exception. I always love playing on Yanagisawa baritones in terms of their sound because it's so responsive. And of course, we're trying to fill such a big column of air in a baritone saxophone, so having a responsive saxophone surely is a desirable quality. And the thing I find with the Yanagisawa sound in general is that there's a nice spectrum of color. I mentioned it before actually with the Yamaha, that you blow softly, you get those nice dark hues in the sound, and then you push the air through it and it's very vibrant and rich. And then sort of at the medium volume, there's just a nice satisfying kind of silky, rich resonance really that you get throughout the entire range. So I can see why these baritones are very popular, not just the 20. I know I'm showcasing the top bronze model here, but the same could be said for the models below it, the 1, the 2, and the 10 as well. So overall, absolutely fantastic. So now I'm going to try and break this down and simplify the 5 baritones that I've demoed to you in terms of what they offer, how they compare broadly with each other, and whether they'd be the right instrument for you. So the way I see it is we've got 2 or 3 broad categories here. We've got the 2 Japanese saxophones right at the top of the money pile. These are the 2 most expensive ones here in this testing circle. And you heard all the things I had to say about them. I find them mechanically very satisfying, just perfect in terms of their design. They feel absolutely great. And tonally, they offer so much as well in terms of that broad spectrum of sound from the darks to the really vibrant sound and very responsive. So, you know, ticking all the boxes, these 2 Japanese ones. And then just taking things in a slightly different direction with the 2 at the front here, and they're slightly more affordable, I should say, price-wise in comparison to the 2 Japanese ones here. And these 2 for me are offering something a bit different, something very interesting, characterful and sort of soulful, and a certain grit in the sound that may appeal to those players who are just looking for perhaps a sound that has a lot of punch and soul, perhaps if you're playing in a soul band or, you know, it's just jazz through and through that you're doing and you want that sort of character in the sound. For me, these do that very well. And again, ergonomics-wise, I've mentioned it before, but they feel pretty satisfying. And generally speaking, these are very well-made baritones. So you're going to save a buck or 2 over and above these prestigious Japanese brands. And then on to my left here, I suppose this is in a slightly different price category, really. So perhaps we can forgive some of those ergonomic things that I mentioned at the outset, because generally speaking, it is a solid instrument. You can see it's really well put together. So the fact that it's in the 5,000s in terms of Great British pounds really sort of justifies those few little misgivings that I mentioned. So overall, a very solid option if you want to save a few pennies in terms of going for these other 4 here. So hopefully that gives you an overview in terms of these 5 professional baritone saxes. I've loved doing this for you because I've actually learned a whole bunch today just testing out these instruments and reminding myself what they offer, and hopefully that has come across to you guys as well. So I hope this video has been useful, and I will see you on another one soon.